1795 Springfield. It is a 69 caliber weapon. It fires a 65 caliber ball, and it is essentially the copy, almost an exact copy of the French Charleville musket, which is what France supplied to the Americans during the Revolutionary War. So not a lot has changed between the 45-ish years separating the American Revolution and the War of 1812. The artillerymen that were issued muskets would, again, they could fight as infantry, but more often than not, they were on garrison duty at a fortification, such as Fort Ontario in Oswego, Fort Tompkins, and all the other series of fortifications at Sackett's Harbor. And aside from having their duties of manning the cannons, they could also act as sentries and would defend the fort with their muskets in the event of an enemy attack. So the musket itself is not a very accurate weapon. If you're familiar with rifles of today or rifles of the 20th century, you're looking at maybe 12 to 1400 yards. These had a range of about 50 yards. The history books will tell you 100 yards was the maximum, but that's in prime conditions, and you got to be one good shot for that. So really 50 yards is where you were at with these guns. They were not rifled, which means it was a smooth bore, which means that the lead ball that traveled out of the muzzle literally kind of went wherever it wanted to go at that point. There was no spin on it, which would make it just kind of drill right through the air. And in fact, I have one of the balls here that I can show you. If I can find it. There we go. And this is what a musket ball looked like. This is made out of lead, soft bullet. It's melted into a die and cast and then clipped off. That's what that little flat spot is right there. And again, it's nothing you want to get hit with. It's not like a modern bullet, which if it went through your arm, it would essentially clip the bone. This, when it hits, will actually smash the bone into multiple little fragments. And of course, in the 19th century, there was no type of reconstructive surgery like there is today in the 21st century. And 9 times out of 10, if you were shot through the bone, your arm or your leg was coming off. It was getting amputated. And if you got shot anywhere in the chest or in the gut, you might as well get your affairs and your will in order, because there was no hope for you, and you would probably die a few days later, a very slow and painful death. So this weapon, how this works, it's very primitive. You have a pan, you have what's called a frizzen, and you have a piece of flint. It's a flint lock. And how this works is, you would pour a little bit of powder in here, you would shut this pan, you pour the rest of the powder and the musket ball in here, you would ram it down, you would pull this hammer all the way back, and then you would fire. And you might not have been able to see it, but there were a few sparks there. Now that spark, those few sparks will actually ignite the powder in the pan and travel through that little hole, which will ignite the main charge here and discharge the weapon. A well-trained soldier could get off about 3 shots a minute. There were reports, especially among British soldiers who had been essentially fighting since 1793 against the French. Some of them could get off 5 shots a minute, the real professional soldiers. And again, like I said, the United States was not prepared for this war that we declared, and the first couple years were rough, and in fact the whole war was rough. There were times where the Americans really knew what they were doing, and then there were times where the Americans didn't know what they were doing. And again, the same can be said for the British and the Canadians. So anyways, I'm going to discharge this weapon. I'm going to take you through the motions of it, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the uniform. So right here,